All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining today's Asset Hub webinar, Managing Journal Entries, Returns, Merging, and Bulk Updating. My name is Natalie, and I'm on the marketing team here at Entertainment Partners, and I have with me my colleague Savannah from the account management team who will be leading you through today's tutorial. Now let's take a quick look at what we're going to cover today. Today's webinar is designed for any production crew who handle reconciling their department's physical assets. And today we are going to cover how to work with journal entries, how to manage your returns, and how to merge and bulk update. Now, while Savannah will be walking you through the demo today, I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A for any submitted questions, so please feel free to write in with questions as you think of them throughout today's webinar. You can submit questions by just clicking on that Q&A that you should see in the menu bar for your Zoom call, and we'll save some time after the demo today to answer your questions. Following today's webinar, you are going to receive some resources from us, and this will include a recording of today's webinar, so you can go back and revisit the content at any time, as well as a link to the SyncOnSet support site, which is support.synconset.com. This is a new support site that we launched at the beginning of 2020, and there you can find all of our help articles and recordings of past webinars. We are also going to send you a link for the productioncommunity.com, which is a resource offered by Entertainment Partners. And there you can find the master series of webinars, which cover topics ranging from the business of production to production technology, including Crew Tools and Asset Hub. And there's also a community forum where you can connect with other industry professionals. You can ask product or industry questions and much, much more. So we definitely recommend that you check that out. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass things over to Savannah, and we'll go ahead and get started with today's demo.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie, for introducing us. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about today's learning journey. So we're going to start with going over journal entries, so what those are and how to manage them within Asset Hub. We'll then jump in and start talking about returns. Again, we'll go over how to manage those returns. After that, we'll take a look at merging assets, and then we'll jump right into bulk updates. So how to bulk reconcile and a bunch of other different options that allow you to move within bulk in Asset Hub. After that, we'll jump into some best practices. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into one of our demo accounts. Just give me a moment here to share my screen. Okay, awesome. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. I just jumped over to Asset Hub, so assets.synconset.com, and it will take you to your studio and your productions. So for today, I'm going to be working out of our fake little demo account here called the Winter Wonderland webinar. So I'll go ahead and click into that, and it's going to take me directly to the Assets tab. The first thing we're going to talk about today is journal entries. So I'm going to move over to the Transactions tab. You can see it here highlighted in this orangey red where my mouse is hovering, and I will click into that. So this Transactions tab has all of the items that came in from accounting's ledger. So if we want to find all of the journal entries that came in from the ledgers, what I'm first going to do is make sure that the column is visible for source code. So all of these columns up here can be customized by selecting this Choose Columns button where my mouse is currently. Once I click that, I'm going to move down to source code and make sure that that is selected. So I see it here. I'm going to select this checkbox and then exit out of it. And you'll see this new column where my mouse is that shows all of the journal entries. You can always sort this alphabetically by clicking this arrow, and you'll see that it will sort those. So if you want to see the AP transactions, you can. I'm going to do the reverse alphabetical so that JE is at the top. So that's quickly how you can filter to find all of your journal entries. So while reconciling transactions from the financial ledger, you may come across multiple transactions for the same recoverable asset. And these would be these journal entries. So let's jump in and just talk about quickly what these are. These transactions may have the same name, however, they'll be coded as journal entry or JE. And journal entries are created on a financial ledger when an asset is moved from one department or subdepartment to another. The accountant will code the asset moving out of one department as a negative amount and moving into a different department as a positive amount. So now that we've filtered by these journal entries, let's go ahead and talk about how we will manage them within Asset Hub. So let's say, for example, these first two transactions, you'll notice that one of them is a positive amount and one of them is a negative amount. So let's just assume that this was these journal entries moving from one department to another, but it's actually the same asset. So when we reconcile these transactions, we don't want to create multiple different assets. We want to create one asset from these transactions. So in order to do that, I would select the checkbox in line with both of these transactions. Once I do that, you'll notice that these buttons up here will illuminate. I can then go ahead and select bulk reconcile and create one asset. Okay, you'll see this pop up. You can enter in as much or as little information as you want here. However, anything with the asterisk is required, so the disposition is required. Let's go ahead and say that these are still in use. And then you can add in a little description here. Let's just go ahead and say, what are these? These are cabbage bins. So we'll say, let's say that these are trash bins. And we can go ahead and add in a disposition note, still being used. If I can spell. And then once you do that, you can go ahead and create that asset. You'll get a notification that an asset has been created. And then when we click over into the Asset tab, you'll see those journal entries reconciled here. Now, if you actually click into the asset and then you click up into the transaction data, you'll see both of those original transactions in here. So this information was not deleted. It was just reconciled together into one asset. Okay, so that is how you handle journal entries within Asset Hub. I'm going to jump back over to the Transactions tab and talk to you about managing returns. So now that we did that, remember that all we did was select both of the transactions, and then we did a bulk reconcile. And that is how we handle journal entries within Asset Hub. This brings us right into our next topic of managing returns within Asset Hub. So while using Asset Hub, you may occasionally see transactions of the same name and amount, with one transaction as a purchase and a second as a return. So let's go ahead and find that within the Transactions tab. So I'm going to jump into a specific department that I know has a return in it. So I'm going to go to Picture Vehicles. So I've just filtered down my Transactions tab to show any of the transactions within the Picture Vehicle department. So again, what we were talking about before, about the positive and negative transaction within Asset Hub indicating a return. So you can see this 1976 Jeep Wagoneer with a price of $3,300. And then you'll see the return transaction down here for the 1976 Jeep Wagoneer with the same negative value. So that's what I was talking about with the negative and positive values in here. And this typically happens as a result of assets that were purchased and then returned to the vendor. In this case, you may see what appears to be a duplicate transaction, when this is simply how your accounting or finance department will keep track of purchases. It's important to note how these transactions appear in your list. So the accounting or finance department on your production logs each and every purchase made so that everyone remains on budget and is held accountable in the event of an audit. So this is going to include a line item in their accounting software for every transaction made against the production. And for returns, this is typically logged twice, so that in transaction here and that out transaction here. Okay. So to reconcile these transactions, what we're going to do is the same as we did for the journal entries. So I'm going to go ahead and select the checkbox in line with the first in purchase and then with the second out transaction. Okay. So once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and select bulk reconcile again. Notice that these buttons do not illuminate until I've selected multiple transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit bulk reconcile, and I'm going to create a single asset. So this is the same thing that we went through before. You can add in a description and disposition note. You want to make sure that you definitely add in that disposition as returned. Okay, so once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit create asset, and you'll get this one asset has been created notification. You can go ahead and hit OK. And now if I jump back over to the asset tab, I'll see that returned Jeep Wagoneer. The status here is clearly marked as returned. And if I click into this asset, simply by clicking on it, and again, I go to this transaction data for this specific asset, I'll see both of the original in and out transactions. Okay. Awesome. So now that we know how to deal with returns in Asset Hub, let's go ahead and talk about how and when to merge items. So to merge items, we're going to jump over to the Asset tab. Okay, so when we merge assets, this feature takes two assets and merges their information, photos, attachments, and financial data into one unified record. One important thing to note about merging assets is that to merge them, you need each asset to belong to the same series or franchise, project, and department. So if you're running into any issues when you're merging assets, please make sure to double check that it belongs to the same series or franchise, as well as the same project and department. So let's go ahead and practice merging two items. So you can do this, for example, if you had a return and you reconciled it into two separate assets instead of one single asset, as we just went over. It's not the end of the world. You can fix it in the asset tab, the asset index, my apologies, and you can merge those assets together. So there are a number of scenarios in which you may want to merge these two assets together. You can quickly do that. So let's go ahead and pick two assets to merge together. I'm going to go ahead and merge these lights from the set deck department, okay? So let's go ahead and say that one of these sets of lights was used on one season of a show, and then the other asset was used on another season. However, they're actually the same asset, so we want to merge them together. So to do that, I would select both of these assets, and then I would scroll up. And again, these buttons up here in the asset index will not be illuminated until you select multiple assets. So the next thing I'm going to do is select merge, and a pop-up will appear. This will allow you to select the information, the primary information that will be visible on the final asset. So this is where we can select which asset name we want to go with and what the actual cost was. So let's say that this asset is correct, except we would like to go with this name. I can go ahead and select that, and I can hit show all fields as well. And this will allow me to select additional information. So I'm going to go ahead and hit merge, and I'm going to confirm that merge. Awesome. So those assets have been merged into one single asset. And it is as simple as that to merge an asset. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to cover in this demo is how to bulk update your transactions and assets. We like to say in Asset Hub, if anything is taking too long or is not efficient, please let us know because there probably is a way to do what you're doing in a bulk fashion. So to get it done much more efficiently without doing everything one at a time when it can be super redundant. So bulk options, it gives you the option to update multiple items at once by selecting assets or transactions, excuse me, and using the different bulk buttons on both the transaction and the asset index. So we're already on the asset index. So let's go ahead and look at what these bulk options can do. So I'm going to go ahead and pick some assets to play with to show you what these bulk options are. So I'm going to go ahead and pick some items in the set deck department. I'll pick this fabric tent, this invite banner, and then these emergency lights. Okay, so now that I've selected those, just a quick note here, you'll see that these buttons now illuminate because these are our bulk options. We need to have multiple items selected in order to use them. So the first thing we can do is use this add or update button. And you'll notice that there are a lot of options here. So the first thing we can update is the character in bulk. We pick some set deck items, so we're not going to want to update the character probably, but we may want to update the set. So what I can do is select set. And then when you do this, you'll be able to select from the sets on your production, and you can select one and go ahead and update that set. Okay, once you would select set, you would go ahead and hit save. Now we don't have any sets added in here because it's just a demo. However, on your project, you may have characters or sets that you want to update. Okay, the next thing that you can update is the disposition. So if I selected disposition, I would be able to come in here and let's say that these were all in use when we reconciled them, but now they're all in storage. So what I would do is I would select those and click storage and then hit save. And I've now bulk updated their disposition. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reselect those assets just so I can show you the rest of the bulk options. And I'll come back up here. Let me scroll to the top so you have the full view. And I would select this add or update button. And you'll also notice you can update a specific field. Now this is customized by Studio. So if you don't have this option available to customize or to add or update any fields, don't worry about that. This will be dependent upon your studio and what customizations they have. The other thing that you can do is add your assets to a group. So if you wanted to do that, you could click add groups, and then you could add it to a specific group at franchise level or depending on your permissions at the studio level. Okay. So the next button in the bulk options is the move button. So if I select the move button, it will allow me to move these assets if I wanted to. I could change the owner. So if I wanted to move it from a different franchise or series, or if I wanted to move it to a division, I could come in here and select that. So this is particularly useful for studio users, post-production coordinators, when they come in here and they want to move specific assets, perhaps to a division if your studio has that. Okay. You can also move it around within the storage location. So if you wanted to switch storage locations, you could add that in here. You could also add in a sub location here as well. Okay, so if you found yourself, marking something as in storage and you didn't want to have to go one by one to add in the storage location, you can always come in here and bulk assign storage locations to your assets. Okay. The next thing you can do is request. We're actually not going to go over this today because only some studios have access to requests and approvals. And it's a kind of a smaller group who uses that. So we're not going to address that today. The other thing we will take a look at is merge. We already saw that. I just wanted to point out here in bulk options, you can only merge 2 assets together at once. So if you have more than 2 assets selected, you can merge them together, but you'll need to do 2 at a time. So you would merge the first two assets, and then you would merge the third asset into that previously merged asset. Okay? The last thing I want to show you for bulk options on the asset page is the export button. So this will allow you to create a report from any of the assets you have selected. So this is especially useful if you want to filter down using your columns and create a report of certain items. So for example, if you wanted to, let me deselect these quickly. If you wanted to take a look at everything in storage, you could select the storage disposition and filter your table to see all of your assets in storage. You could then use this top checkbox and it will select everything on the page. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my assets in storage. And I'll click this export button. And you'll notice that you can export it in 3 different ways. You can export it as a CSV file, as a PDF file, or as asset pages. Now, asset pages is a report that generates a single asset on a single page with photos if the photos are added in, and with all of the detailed information about that particular asset. Keep in mind that this will be a lot of paper if you are exporting a lot of assets. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to print, 50 pages or 500, it might be more efficient to do a CSV or a PDF depending on what you're looking for. Okay, so those are the bulk options on the asset index. I'm going to jump over to the transaction index to show you some more bulk options. Perfect. Okay, so we are on the transaction index now, and I'm currently selected into the picture vehicle department. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of that by deselecting picture vehicles and letting this reload for a moment. Okay, so we see a bunch of different transactions here. I'm going to go ahead and select some for an example. So I'll go ahead and select a couple of these editorial transactions. So once I select these, you'll notice again that these bulk option buttons will illuminate. So when these are deselected, let me do that quickly, you'll notice that they're not illuminated. Okay, let me just do that again. Okay. So let's talk about the bulk options on the transaction index. So the first thing we can do is that add or update button. And this will have the same options that it did on the asset index. So we don't have to go over all of these again, but you can update your character, your set, your disposition, and the department. The only new option on this page is the move to excluded option. Now, this will be used in a very specific scenario. Excluding transactions should only be used when there's a mistake by accounting and something came through on the ledger that was not actually an asset. In the event that that happens, say for example, it doesn't meet the asset threshold in terms of price, something came through, that was $20 and it was just a mistake by accounting. What you would do in this case is you would move it to excluded. So you would select this move to excluded button, and it would move those transactions directly into this excluded tab. Now, if I click into the excluded tab, you'll see those transactions right here at the top. And this just allows you to remove those transactions from the general transaction index, and it allows you to not have to reconcile them into assets. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the transaction index. Give me a second here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select some more transactions just to finish going through those bulk updates. So I'm going to select these 2 construction transactions, and then I'm going to move over to bulk reconcile. So when I click bulk reconcile, there are a couple of different options here. Bulk reconcile is similar to merging assets in the sense that it takes 2 assets and it will merge them into one asset. And this will take two transactions and create one asset. It does not take multiple transactions and create multiple assets. So say I wanted to merge these two transactions together, I would click the bulk reconcile and I would create a single asset. I could go ahead and add in a disposition. Let's say that actually these look like maybe a return with the positive and the negative in and out value. So I'm going to go ahead and select returned and create that asset. Again, you'll get that notification that said one asset has been created. You can select OK, and that is done. So I'm going to select a couple of more transactions just to show you what the last export option is. Again, this is similar to the asset index. However, when exporting from the transaction index, you will only be able to export as a CSV. Okay, awesome. So we covered a lot today very quickly. This will conclude the live demo portion of today's webinar. So I'm going to jump back quickly to the PowerPoint and go over some best practices. Okay, great. So best practices. You can filter by source code on the transaction index to find any journal entries. That's what we did at the very beginning by filtering to show the JE using the source code. You can also bulk reconcile the in and out transactions to manage returns. Remember to just look for those negative and positive values. This one is simple, but you can merge two assets into one. It's a bit of a newer feature, so just remember that one. If you are updating anything line by line, check out the bulk update option for more efficiency. And of course, bookmark the Help Center at support.synconset.com. Okay, Natalie, I'm going to pass it back to you here.
All right. Thank you, Savvy. Thank you for that great demo. And to let everyone know, we are about to get started with the Q&A portion of today's webinar. So we wanted to give you a chance to write in with any last questions. And while you are doing that, we do want to let you know that we will try to get to as many questions as we can. But if your question does not get answered live, please don't worry. We do record all questions that get submitted, and we will be sending out supplemental information following today's webinar. So it looks like we do have a few questions so far. So Savvy, why don't we go ahead and jump in and get started?
Awesome. Okay, so we do have some great questions. The first one I'm seeing here says, can I bulk reconcile transactions all at once into separate assets? The answer to that is no. The bulk reconcile option is used to create one asset for multiple transactions. So again, you can think about it more like that merge feature in the asset index. The bulk reconcile will allow you to take two transactions and turn it into one asset. And this can be used, this has multiple use cases. So if you're using it for returns or made to order items or journal entries, you would use the bulk reconcile for all of those. Okay, let's take a look at another question. We have another one here that says, what happens if I try to merge two assets that have different information? Okay, this is a great question. So this is what we went over when we did the merge assets earlier. And so when merging assets, you will be prompted to choose information from each asset to keep as that primary information for the merged asset. So it will actually pop up with different options from each of the assets that you're merging together. And you can go ahead and just select the information that you'd like to keep for the final asset. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have another one that says, on my last show, I was reconciling transactions throughout shooting. So I marked a lot of them as in use. I then had to update them once I knew where they were actually being stored or going. Is that something I can do in bulk next time? This is a great question, and actually one that we run into a lot. So the reason we really want to highlight these bulk options is to save time for people, especially at RAP. So in the scenario like this, where this person had reconciled all of their transactions while they were shooting and they marked them in use because it seems like they wanted to stay on top of everything and not have to reconcile everything at wrap. What they can then do is just select the all of the transactions and bulk update those, so they can bulk update the storage location and the disposition. Okay, I can actually show that to you quickly if you want. So I'm going to share my screen again and just show you what that looks like. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen here. So what I'm talking about with this bulk update is if I jump back into the asset index, I'm looking at everything in storage here. So if I wanted to select these items and I wanted to update the disposition, I could do this add/update, and I could go ahead and select disposition. And this would allow me to switch them. Say, for example, if these were previously in use, I could now mark them all as in storage. And you can switch it to any disposition that you'd like. Um, and you would just do that in here. So let's say I want to mark them all as in use. I know this is the opposite of the scenario he's talking about, but I could just change the disposition here and save that. Okay. And so that should make it easy. When you're finishing up, you can always select, you can filter by disposition. Let's say we wanted returned, and then there's only a couple here, but you can always select all of the transactions on that page and then update those. Okay. I am going to jump back to the PowerPoint. It looks like that is all the time we have for questions right now. So I will switch back to Natalie and let her take over. Oops, I'm not sure if you're speaking, Natalie. You might be on mute.
Oh, that mute button is tricky. Thank you for that. I was just thanking everyone for submitting questions, and it does look like we did get a last question in right before you wrapped up. So we will be reaching out to you individually and getting you an answer there. But we just want to let everyone again know that if you think of a question outside of today's webinar or anything past what we've discussed today, that you can always reach out to us and we will be happy to answer your questions that way. So we just want to give a quick overview of how you can get in touch with our support team. So the first thing you can do is when you are logged into Asset Hub, you will see a blue chat bubble in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you click on that chat bubble, you will be connected directly to our support team, and you can go ahead and ask them a question there, and they're pretty quick about getting back to you. Their support hours are Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Outside of those hours, you can always email our support team at support@synconset.com. Or if you want to give us a phone call, you can also do that, again, between the hours of Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And outside of getting in touch with us directly, if you'd like to do some self-guided learning or check out some videos on how to solve some issues you may be running into, we suggest that you head over to the SyncOnSet support site, which is support.synconset.com. There you will find a category that is dedicated specifically to Asset Hub. So if you click on Asset Hub, it will pull up all of the support materials that we have for Asset Hub, and you can find pretty much everything you might be looking for there. So again, we want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to join us for today's webinar. That we hope that this was very informative and that you are more comfortable and confident with managing your assets and transactions. If you could please give us some feedback and complete our feedback survey, we would love to know how we did today and if there's anything that we can improve for the future, or if there are any future webinar topics that you would like to see. We hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe and healthy, and thank you again for joining us.